Good morning. We are very happy to present our paper here and discuss with you. And we are also happy to have you, Professor Adele, because you are one of our references. And I am Olivia Pascoaleto from Brazil. I am a professor of labor law at Fundação Getúlio Vargas Law School at São Paulo. Catharina.
My name is Catharina, and I'm a researcher at Getúlio Vargas Foundation and also a Master of Science from the University of São Paulo. Thank you. Today, we intend to present a research that proposes to investigate the initiatives of union entities of Brazil to enable the effectiveness of domestic worker rights through social dialogue. Professor, you can move on, please. For that, our methodology is divided in two fronts, one theoretical and one empirical. On the one hand, we developed a theoretical part based on a literature review using a bibliographic research carried out with the databases. On the other hand, we intend to develop an empirical part by using documentary research based on materials produced by union entities, for example, and also interviews, which will be explained in a few minutes. In order to proceed, it's interesting to observe that the numbers in Brazil and what the domestic workers represent for us. In the country, we have a population of more than 5 million domestic workers, with a majority of Black women. Regarding informality, it's identified that less than a quarter are formally registered and have an average salary around $200, which is lower than the national minimum wage. The average salary is reduced in the case of Black working women. In Brazil, the trajectory of federal regulation of domestic work reveals a trajectory of exclusions, distancing it from recognition as a work. In this sense, in order to press the authorities in the 30s, the first collective movements emerged in the country for demanding rights and recognition of the category. In these movements, the figure of Laudelina de Campos Melo stands out, who is represented in this image, and who founded the first association of domestic workers in Brazil. This mobilization were structured in associations and in the holding of congresses and also meetings to discuss the topics related to the category and also its recognition as a work. In 1972, the first instrument for the category was published, which brought its definition and a series of rights. However, in the congresses and meetings of the category, the effectiveness of the instrument was discussed, concluding that it didn't meet the needs of the category. So the mobilization for the rights and also its recognition, they intensified in these movements. So you can pass on, please. So in the 80s, the federal constitution was enacted with an extensive list of social rights for rural and also urban workers. The constitution expressly provided for the exclusion of the category of domestic workers from the vast majority of them. Even with the exclusions of rights related to collective bargaining, for example, the Constitution made it possible for associations of domestic workers to become union entities. So the instrument mentioned also for the first time the term category, which may be signing a recognition of the struggles of these workers. Also, please, you can move on. In the 90s, the National Federation of Domestic Workers, FENATRAD, was founded, which strengthened the relations with institutions such as, for example, International Labour Organization. Currently, the country has about 32 unions, considering the information provided by our Ministry of Labor, which are mainly concentrated in the state of São Paulo, as you can see in this graphic. Also, there are unions of domestic employers in the state of São Paulo and Paraná. I would like to take the opportunity to give the floor to Professor Pascoaleto, who will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Catharina. Currently, Brazil has ratified the ILO Convention number 189. And this ratification, in our view, could be resulted from a long process of dialogue between Brazil and ILO. And this dialogue, when we think about Brazil in this context, it's not just the Brazil as the state, but also different social actors like organizations that represent, for example, the domestic workers. So we can see this dialogue in multi-directional movement of influences. So ILO influencing Brazil, and Brazil influencing some kind of discussions in the International Labour Organization. And in order to ratify the ILO Convention number 189, Brazil needs to organize its domestic law first with a constitutional amendment that guarantee a greater range of rights to domestic workers, because until this constitutional amendment in 2013, domestic workers were considered as employees. However, they were employees with less rights than the others. And together with this constitutional amendment in 2015, we had a complementary law that regulates some kind of rights, especially related to rights related to time and hours of work. However, beside this progress in the formal law or on the books, considering the data that Catharina has presented to us in the previous slides, we can think that maybe, or for sure, this kind of rights are not effective, in fact, because we have a different kind of a lot of informality. We have law wages. So considering that, we have an hypothesis here that maybe the social dialogue, and one example of that, the collective bargaining and other kind of social dialogue conducted by labor movements, can help the effectiveness of these rights. And our idea here is think about that, what kind of initiatives, and understand if there are, and if there are, which are the initiatives of union entities to enable the effectiveness of rights of domestic workers through social dialogue. This is our idea in this paper, and this is our empirical front of this researcher. We are mapping all the material produced by union entities, and our idea is also interview these entities to understand what kind of initiatives they have. However, we have a point here that I need to emphasize, that the interviews in Brazil need to be authorized by an ethics committee. And we are in the middle of this process. It's not a fast process, so we are waiting their authorization to start the interviews with union representatives. So when we get this authorization, our idea is to interview and ask some questions like the questions below. So what does union understand by social dialogue, how they practice this social dialogue, what are the most significantly difficulties to practice the social dialogue, if they have or not contact with employers' unions, if they have ever worked in the structuring and writing of the collective agreements from collective bargaining, what are the most difficult rights to implement, and how does the union entity carry out these initiatives for its effectiveness. So we are in the middle of this research, and we hope that at the next conference we can be able to share these final results with the interviews with all of you. Thank you so much, and our email and contact is here if you want to continue this dialogue with us. Thank you.